This is Shalom World Podcast.
Have you ever thought about the clash between our digital world and what's right and wrong? That's where The Porn Disaster comes in, a series that dives into one of society's most hush-hush topics. Get ready for some real talk as we dig into the ups and downs of today's tech-driven desires. Kids, relationships, recovery, we're not holding back. From the Catholic Church's take on porn to why our brains get hooked, we cover it all. Join us as we chat about the messy stuff, the good, the bad, and the uncomfortable. Hosted by Patricia Keane, we've got an expert panel here to chat about porn addiction, what it does, how it affects us, and how we can heal.
Hello, welcome to Shalom World. My name is Patricia Keane and I'm coming to you from Maynooth, County Kildare, Ireland. I'm presenting a series called The Porn Disaster. Today we are on episode 5 and our subject today is what should we be teaching children about porn and what does porn teach children? So my guests today are
Father Chris Hayden, priest from the Diocese of Ferns, Ireland, spiritual director, St. Patrick's Seminary, Maynooth. Father Alan Hoffa, priest from the Diocese of Allentown, USA. He has BA in philosophy and Masters in divinity. Dr. Kielty Oberlin, she's from Ireland, doctorate in psychology and Masters in counseling, specializing in eating disorder recovery. Gerard O'Donoghue, he is an engineer from Ireland, counseling parents and creating awareness around pornography.
So I'm going to go to my first question on what should we be teaching children about porn? So Father Chris, I'm going to you first.
Okay, to start maybe with the broad canvas, certainly here in Ireland at the moment, when the whole area of sex education is being discussed, in a lot of quarters you'll hear talk of the need for a sex education that is fact-based rather than faith-based. When I hear that, I have to admit that what I'm translating it in my mind straight away into fact-based rather than value-based. And it's putting a wedge between fact and value, which we really, even to say that sex education should be this or it should be that, that is a value statement in and of itself. It's a statement of value. The important thing to remember is that we cannot have sex education that is value-free.
And is that what they're trying to do in the educational systems?
Strictly speaking, no.
It's
what values? They're trying to instill different values. The people on the, let's charitably say, on the other side of the argument from ourselves, they have values. They hold values very, very strongly indeed.
Yes.
But they're different values, and I would say they are very wrong values, and they're values that don't conduce to human flourishing. In a word, they're false values. Now, in saying that, I don't want to be overly polemical and accuse any individual of acting in bad faith, but as a matter of observable, dare I say, fact, the values that are being instilled in a purely secular and biological and biologistic and functional approach to human sexuality, they don't work. They don't make for contented, adjusted individuals. So values are in the service of, and they reflect an underlying take on what it means to be a human being. What does it mean to be a man or a woman? What does it mean to be a sexual person? In an earlier program, Father Alan spoke about the theology of the body, which is, strictly speaking, it's not even theology. It's an underlying, it's an anthropology. It's what do we understand ourselves to be? And that's a very good question. For instance, again, the broad canvas, when a parent rocks up to the school door with their little toddler and it's this day one of the child's multi-year education there, a very good question would be, and you wouldn't ask it as I'm about to phrase it, but to have it in your mind, what do you think my child's life is for? Because that's going to govern it to a great extent, how you educate my child. What do you think my child's sexuality is for? And if the answer is, oh, we've no idea, well then you've nothing to say, so please don't, leave it to me. Or if it's, tell me what you think that's about, so that I can make an assessment as a parent. But in any event, value-free ultimately means meaning-free. Value-free equals meaning-free equals meaningless. If somebody tells you that they have no values, either they're not telling you the full truth or they're lacking understanding, they're very gravely lacking in understanding. We cannot escape the question of values. The only question is whose values? What values? Are they good values? Are they values that conduce to human flourishing? Are they values that will turn your little child into a happy, contented, flourishing person, able to give himself and herself in love and to receive love?
I want to go back to the sexual revolution, because in A Better Vision you have written about this quite extensively. And it was after a lot of research. But what I want to explore here is, how different was the teaching before the sexual revolution about the value of oneself? What was the message that the church gave about, in anthropology, about the value of the self?
Oddly enough, since the sexual revolution, the church has clarified its teaching in a remarkable way, largely thanks to Pope St. John Paul II's theology of the body, which has really crystallized the whole understanding of the human person as a sexual being. The teaching hasn't changed, but it's been so refined and so developed and so clarified. So we have that tremendous stride forward, while at the very same time, in parallel, society is just, there's a loss of parameters, of handrails, of understandings, of guidance, and it's our task to be to take stock of that and take note of it, and to continue to proclaim the message that we have, because it's not, again, as we've seen in earlier programs, it's not a random imposition. It is offering wise guidance for good living. And we need to be wise to those who are undermining the possibility of a coherent picture for youngsters, those who are telling them that anything goes, really, so long as you practice hygiene and you get consent. That's a nonsensically minimalist. That's not to rubbish the idea of consent, of course not. But in and of itself and on its own, as a principle for human behavior, many people's lives have been destroyed by entirely consensual stupidity. So that's just one instance of where we have so vastly much more to offer. And we need to become better able as priests, as parents. The challenge to us all is to become better and better able to articulate it to our kids and to model it, to live it, because we really do have a gift. And the alternative is not a gift. It's misleading at best.
Father Alan, you're on the ground. You've been working in this area for many years, 7 in fact. And what are you seeing on the ground, what pornography is teaching children?
One of the realities, to sort of bounce off of what Father Chris just said, we've seen a pendulum swing. Before the sexual revolution, there really wasn't a lot spoken about the good of the human body, the good of sexuality. It was something that was very quiet, very private. Then comes the sexual revolution, and we swing the opposite way, where everything is out there and open, and yet there's still that background of, but we don't talk about certain things, so it's not properly integrated. And so what we're looking at is to bring it to the center, where there's balance. And one of the things that the influence of pornography in our society today is still causing is an imbalance. For instance, one of the things that we want is for the good of relationships, especially for men to not objectify women. That, I think, is something that everybody could agree upon. And yet, pornography does that exact thing. It is not only good to objectify women, it is good to use women. That's what porn teaches children, teaches boys. What does it teach girls? Men can't be trusted because they can use you, they can hurt you, and so this is something that gets taught to them through this. The other thing is it strips away a level of innocence. It gives them something that they really can't understand at their age. Think about this. If there are certain entities, like the WHO, that is trying to, through the school systems, introduce pornography as a learning model, okay, let's take a step back. Why isn't the WHO, for the sake of transportation, for instance, and helping children to get from point A to point B, encouraging that, you know what, we should give cars to 0 to 4-year-olds. We should give them a car and let them go and use it. Well, of course, that's ridiculous because they can't operate a vehicle. They don't have the reasoning to be able to operate a vehicle. And yet, something that is much more complex than putting a pedal on a brake or an accelerator and putting hands on a wheel and steering, something that's much more complex, which is our reproductive systems, our human sexuality. We're going and saying, nope, let's just hand this over and let them figure it out, or we're going to go and over-sexualize this very crucial part of an innocent stage of their body. Think about the last time that you've been in the presence of a child that has just shown a beautiful childlike innocence. Our Lord in the Gospels calls us to be childlike. There's a value in that for the maturation of the child and for the separation between children in their growth and then when we become adults. And one of the things that this is doing is fast-tracking them through the important phases of their adolescent development and pushing them into a world that they can't understand. And so, and as I had mentioned also, one of the things that pornography is teaching children as well is that there are things that you can do to other children because of what they see in pornography. That if it can be done there, and I can go on and I can see so much, and it's not just I saw one random act, but when pornography shows so much with so many different people, that means that I, around so many people, can do these things too. And you get into peer-to-peer assault, and it is unhealthy for the world in which we live. So I think Father beautifully enunciated what we should be teaching children about sex, and also then making sure that there is preventative measures teaching children about pornography and what it is, but not allowing pornography to be that which teaches our children about their sexuality.
Just to make one more point regarding what is and isn't taught, and this is sex education in general. There's a sex education program that's circulating in draft form now, and it's from the Curriculum Development Authorities here in Ireland, and it's one of the programs for secondary school. And the only place, I'm pretty sure I'm on solid ground in saying this, but the only place where it refers to the link between sex and babies, that'd be kind of sex 101 for most people. The only place where this program refers to the link between sex and conception is when it talks about contraception. It's how to break that link. Now, most people know that sex has rather a lot to do with bringing new people into the world, but it's a complete inversion of that deep, obvious, physical, natural, inherent significance of sexuality. And the only time it refers to it at all is how can we break it? That's also moving in the direction of, sex has not got to do with, and this is related to pornography, because pornography teaches us that sex has not got to do with making babies, bringing children into a community of love where two adults have taken a permanent bound commitment to each other, and that's the community love into which they'll welcome any children that are brought into being by their lovemaking and so on. And pornography says it's got nothing to do with any of that. And if any of that gets in the way, then we need to get rid of that. So pornography, there's a link there with the kind of anti-life mentality. So pornography it teaches a lot. It teaches very effectively, but what it has to teach is very toxic. And it's broader than just that. But I guess we can keep our focus primarily on pornography at the moment.
You're in clinical practice, right? And you travel a lot, you give lectures, you're teaching, and you're here doing work like this. And you're seeing a lot of young clients. Are you seeing in practice what pornography is teaching 18 and 20-year-olds about sex?
Unfortunately, yes. They're coming to me for my main practice is eating disorders. But see, even if my client hasn't watched pornography, their peers have. Okay. They're talking about it. The values of it are coming into the population. What is expected of them to be, how sexual they're expected to be is coming in. And to be upset about it isn't okay. So it's perpetuating that silence. I need to just go along with it. And then, of course, it's the obvious bit of the boys don't feel that they're virile enough or strong enough or look good enough, and the girls think. So it's setting these unattainable expectations and standards of how they should be and how they should look.
Is this also feeding into eating disorders in boys?
Absolutely. We're seeing a high rise in eating disorders in boys.
Yeah. Father, you want to come in there?
No, I'm actually going to pass over to Gerard.
Yeah, just listening, something struck me listening to the three panelists, if I can even go back a little bit further, it's one thing about what pornography teaches children, but what worries me is the education system. What are our teachers teaching our children about pornography? Because it's one thing a child will know, so inherently, we've discussed it in other episodes, that pornography is wrong. But if a teacher validates the pornography, according to the program that the NCCA and etc. have set, well, now that gives the child, and they're saying, this is actually, what I'm doing isn't too bad. It's probably okay. Everyone's at it. The teacher is acknowledging everyone's at it. And it breaks down into good porn or bad porn. What we should be, and what I'd love to see people saying is, there is no such thing as good porn. It should be no porn. This will pull you in. It's highly addictive. It objectifies especially women. It's addictive from the point of view that you'll always want to see something novel. You're not going to want to see the same thing as you saw last week. So this is going to pull you in. It's like a hard drug. So, to give the analogy of drunk driving, you wouldn't say to somebody, if you know that they're going out to discos and the person who's dropping them home is drink driving, you wouldn't say, that's all right, but just put on your seatbelt the next time. Just make sure you're wearing your seatbelt. And I think that's where we're going with this whole thing with porn, is we're breaking it up. We should be saying, don't go there, don't touch it. And that's what I'd love to see the education system saying. Not suitable for anyone, adults, but especially not children either.
What Gerard's been saying there, I think that's utterly wise. There's just a kind of a timidity culturally. Well, of course, culturally, there's a whole different set of values there. But for us, we should be setting the bar absolutely high, saying, no, there is no threshold level of pornography for children. It's not how much can they cope with it without being damaged. It is no. And we are doing our level best to try and ensure, and now we'll get on to technological stuff and solutions and all of that, but to put out the message, because we're not naysayers. Behind it all, we're offering a gift, which is a true and good value system for children, what conduces to human flourishing. So we're doing that, but we also have to fight hard the rearguard action in the cultural context in which we are, with an ever lengthening reach of the state, trying to circumvent parental values in the classroom and elsewhere. So that's the landscape. But if we're talking about, if the conversation regarding education and pornography is, if it's in any way, even tacitly, about what would be an acceptable threshold level, no, there's no acceptable threshold level. Like, you don't give a 4-year-old a car, and you don't give a 4-year-old pornography. Yeah.
So the question is, how do we set about showing our young people, while pornography may look like sex without consequences, it actually has very grave consequences? Father Allen, I'll go to you first on that.
One of the things that we are finding more and more now is the effects long-term that with the ability to access pornography freely, and with smartphones and it being so pervasive in every aspect, we're finding the breakdown within marriages and within relationships. One of the things, for instance, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a future episode, is the fact of there is a rise of rape within marriages between husband and wife. Someone may say to themselves, how does that happen? Oh, it very much happens because wives are being forced by their husbands to reenact the things that they're seeing on the screen. And so when you look back at children, those people who, many of them are, as adults, are experiencing that, we're getting into that phase where they had this when they were children, and this is the impact, and it follows through. Or they don't even get to marriage, and they wonder why they can't foster a wholesome marriage. Why? Because their whole sense of human sexuality, of how you relate to a person, shouldn't just be easy enough for me to walk up to a person and say, hey, let's have sex, let's do what they're doing on pornography, and that's how relationship works. And then they find out that the other person's saying, no, that's not how a relationship works at all. And then there's feelings of rejection, there's feelings of isolation, and then they go back and they find solace, what they think is solace, in the pornography. So there is a full continuum here of all of these things that children are learning about pornography that they carry through into adult life, and is a very warped sense of relational sexuality for them.
Listening to you speaking, there's a whole array of emotions involved here. You live your life, you start your life growing up, and it takes many years to develop an emotional intellect where you can express how you feel. Mm-hmm. And that is, I feel humiliated, I feel embarrassed, so many people don't develop that emotional language until much later in life, when they can identify the feeling and be able to put the word there. So there's all of this mass confusion that's going on in the minds of young people. And Kielty, you being the clinician, you see how difficult it is to move step by step to get the young people to where they can identify how they're actually feeling, because it's a mishmash of emotions.
Mm-hmm. Especially in young minds, part of that whole developmental element is to be able to identify feelings, feel them, identify them, let them pass, recognizing that they will pass, rather than impulsively react to them. If we look at eating disorders, if we look at pornography, addiction, they're impulsive. What they are doing is they're actually running from emotions. They're trying to bury them, hide them. So their way of coping is to ignore, push away, not deal with, basically. Anything but deal with them. So we're seeing this whole group of people in adulthood who have never developed the ability to acknowledge their emotions, feel their emotions, that are just impulsively kind of running away from them without even understanding that.
And isn't it true to say that self-control is not the strong suit of teenagers? It's not the way they're wired. I mean, neurologically, the prefrontal cortex is not developed, so they don't have impulse control. And just as well they don't, because they have a lot of learning to do, and we don't want them all hanging back. But precisely that means there has to be an alliance between adults and teenagers. We have to be there for them, because they don't have the capacity to be fully there for themselves by nature, and it's good where they are, but there are risks associated, and we need to be there. We are their line of defense. We need to gradually give them greater and greater freedoms, but we have to be there for them, because to do things that they can't neurologically do for themselves yet and cognitively do for themselves yet.
Well, thank you for your contribution to today's programme. Episode 6, we're going to be dealing with child protection and safety. Monitoring devices. How do you protect your child? How do you go about it? Where do you get the devices, and how important it is? That'll be quite surprising when adults start doing that. So please join us for episode 6. Father, a prayer before we go.
Okay, well, pornography, we've seen it teaches a very great deal, and all of its teaching, unfortunately, is toxic. Here's another lovely prayer from the Irish, and it's one that I suppose can express parents' concern for their children's welfare. May the one who brought us safely from the night bring us safely from the day, Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary willing, ourselves and all that we have, inside and outside, far and near, keep us free and safe, ourselves and all that we have. Amen.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, panelists. And we will see you at our next episode.
And that wraps up another episode of The Porn Disaster. Thank you to our incredible panelists for sharing your expertise and insights. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in and being part of this important conversation. If you've been impacted by anything we discussed today, know that help is available. Understanding leads to healing, and by shedding light on these tough topics, we are one step closer to positive change. Join us next time for another enlightening discussion. Until then, take care and stay curious.
Shalom World Podcasts is now available on all online platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others.